Well, let's talk more about this then. I'm joined tonight by Onica Makwakwa, who is Director at Wise for Africa. Onica, evening to you. Welcome to News at Prime. So today, Ntuthuko Shoba finally found guilty. Was there ever any doubt in your mind that he'd orchestrated the murder of Tshegofatso Pule?
Not at all, not at all. And we actually just welcome this judgment.
And, you know, just as some of Tshegofatso Pule's relatives were saying, that it's bittersweet, isn't it? You've got justice or some sense of it, yet the reality is she will never come back. They'll never be able to speak to Tshegofatso Pule again. They'll never be able to hold her again. And sadly, that is the ultimate cost of gender-based violence.
Absolutely. I think that's the travesty, right? We need to get to a point where we celebrate saving women's lives as opposed to getting justice for them after they've perished.
And let me ask you about some of the details we learned throughout the trial. I mean, Tshegofatso Pule, from what we know, from Newzroom was killed for a couple of R1,000, not a lot of money for most people in this country. And you wonder why it is that a human life in this country is worth so little, and why people even put a price on it to begin with.
I think for a very long time, there also just has not been any consequence to these kinds of crimes, right? You know, femicide didn't just start to happen in 2018 when it became widely reported. By the time we were hearing more about it, many people were getting away. Many perpetrators were getting away with murdering women. So I think for me, the biggest issue from this point forward is going to be looking at the sentencing to begin to have the kinds of sentences that also serve as a deterrent to this type of crime. You know, it's not just with femicide alone. I think in general, we just have not been really good at punishing those who commit these kinds of crimes, but also, you know, at the moment, we also have a parole system that also releases them back into society. And we've seen the increase also in former offenders offending once again. So I think our laws have to just get a little stricter and better enforced so that we can make sure that we are focusing more on prevention and less on catching people afterwards. And
most of these cases are not prevented. I mean, in this country, hundreds of women are killed every year, if not thousands, in fact, killed, right? Tshegofatso Pule's case now has resulted in the conviction of 2 men, Newzroom and today Ntuthuko Shoba, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was a lot of evidence that the prosecutors could also rely on to get these convictions. We looked at cell phone records, we looked at CCTV footage. For many women who suffer this sort of horrific attack, we don't have a lot of that, and there's been criticism that the investigative work is at times quite shoddy.
Yes, it is. But, you know, it also just doesn't start at that level, right? I mean, by the time there's investigation, there's already a crime that's been committed. It really starts at a time when women report about being scared, being followed, and we've seen how a lot of them come back to complain about lax response from the police. So beginning to understand that the police have duty to protect, and protecting is before a crime is actually committed, and I think those also need to be strengthened. We can't just rely on the technology to tell us what had happened. We need to rely on intelligence to actually help us prevent these crimes. But also we need to start believing women. I think that's really the biggest thing in this country, is that we don't believe women. Even when they go to the police station to try and open a case, sometimes they are told, oh, you know, don't you want to work it out? What did you do? The police role is always to open a case and investigate, help women to get protection orders. But it doesn't just end also with just getting the protection order. It's about what does this piece of paper entitle you to do in the event the person contacts you, and the police need to be ready and available to respond accordingly. So I think we need to really sharpen and demand our constitutional right to safety. And that right to safety means that it's a right to be safe before we're even harmed.
And you mentioned sentencing as what's going to ultimately be the true test of whether Ntuthuko Shoba is made to pay for his sins. In this case, the killer in this case, confessed, struck a deal with the state. He's currently serving 20 years behind bars. Would anything less than life be acceptable for Ntuthuko Shoba as the mastermind?
Not at all. Not. It needs to be, and also I think for me the most important thing is the no parole, because we know that 25 years just means probably 12 years in prison and back out at it again, right? So I think it's really important for us to really push for no parole. In fact, we've been writing letters to Minister Lamola for over 2 years now, asking him to have a moratorium on paroles for sex offenders specifically. And that's because of the evidence that we've seen of former offenders being able, continuing to offend again after they've been released. And the response we get is they are looking into it, they're investigating the parole system. Well, you can investigate the parole system while you still have a moratorium on parole specifically for sex offenders. And that's really how the state can begin to proactively keep women safe.
Thank you very much for that. Onica Makwakwa, Director at Rise for Africa. Good to speak to you, ma'am. Thank you.